Think every best-selling car in American automotive history is a flawless masterpiece of engineering? Think again. Today, we are tearing down the garage doors to expose the top 10 absolute worst cars that somehow tricked millions of Americans into handing over their hard-earned cash. We are talking about absolute garbage machines, vehicles with pathetic engines, terrifying safety records, and interiors made of the cheapest plastics imaginable. Yet these disasters sold unbelievably well. How did these terrible machines dominate the United States market and make billions of dollars? We are exposing the brilliant marketing tricks, the historical context, and the brutal reality. Kicking off our countdown at 10 is the Triumph TR7, a British sports car produced from 1975 to 1981. It was famously marketed as the shape of things to come. Weighing in at roughly 2,200 pounds, it was powered by a weak 2-liter engine pushing out just 105 horsepower. It took a painfully slow 9.1 seconds to reach 60 miles per hour. Triumph abandoned their gorgeous classic styling for a bizarre wedge-shaped coupe. Underneath the hood lay the absolute nightmare of British Leyland manufacturing, plagued by catastrophic electrical system failures. Despite being fundamentally broken straight from the factory floor, the TR7 was incredibly successful. It sold over 112,000 units in the United States, becoming the best-selling TR model in history. Why? Because in the late 1970s, buyers were absolutely seduced by the illusion of driving a futuristic sports car. They wanted that wedge shape so desperately that they ignored the massive warning signs. To give you a taste of the brutal reality, one furious owner stated, "I loved the way my TR7 looked, but it stayed in my driveway waiting for tow trucks." It was a complete tragedy of British engineering, proving that an edgy, futuristic design can completely blind buyers to mechanical ruin. The TR7 was a headache, but it did not pretend to be something it wasn't. However, if you think British electrical issues and slow acceleration are bad, just wait until you see what is coming next. Prepare yourself to see how an American car company ruined a universally beloved nameplate with cheap plastic and fake styling at our 9 spot. The disappointment only gets exponentially worse from here on out. Rolling into 9 is the Dodge Caliber, haunting American roads from 2007 to 2012. When Dodge announced they were replacing the universally beloved Dodge Neon, expectations were incredibly high. What we got instead was a sluggish, overweight hatchback weighing over 3,200 pounds. The base engine struggled to produce 148 horsepower. The Caliber was plagued by one of the most agonizing, continuously variable transmissions ever built. Stepping on the gas pedal did not result in rapid acceleration. It only produced a loud, moaning drone while the heavy car slowly crawled forward. Yet somehow Dodge managed to sell nearly 400,000 of these miserable machines in the United States. For the exact same starting price of $14,000, buyers could have driven off the lot in a bulletproof, highly reliable Honda Civic or Toyota Corolla. Those alternatives could easily run for over 200,000 miles. Instead, Americans chose the Caliber. Why? Because Dodge perfectly nailed the aggressive miniature SUV styling right when the crossover craze began. People wanted a tough-looking commuter car on a tight budget, sacrificing every ounce of driving pleasure for a fake rugged exterior. The Dodge Caliber was an absolute masterclass in selling an illusion to the American public. It offered the visual promise of a sport utility vehicle but delivered the driving dynamics of a heavy, broken shopping cart. But teasing our next absolute disaster. If you think the Caliber's fake SUV styling was a massive scam, wait until you see the ultimate badge engineering tragedy. General Motors pulled off one of the greatest automotive heists in the 1980s, proving that people will pay thousands of dollars just for a shiny emblem on the grille. Taking the 8th spot is the legendary insult to luxury itself. The Cadillac Cimarron sold from 1982 to 1988. General Motors was panicking as European luxury imports stole younger buyers. Their solution? They took a dirt-cheap 2,600-pound Chevrolet Cavalier economy car and slapped a Cadillac crest on it. The Cimarron launched with an astoundingly pathetic 1.8-liter four-cylinder engine making just 88 horsepower. It took an agonizing 13.7 seconds to reach 60 miles per hour. It was incredibly slow, remarkably loud, and drove exactly like the cheap economy car it truly was. Here is the massive financial gut punch. Cadillac had the absolute audacity to price the Cimarron at nearly double the cost of a standard Chevrolet Cavalier. You were literally paying thousands of extra dollars purely for a piece of shiny plastic shaped like a Cadillac logo. In its first year, sales were surprisingly solid. Desperate status seekers wanted the prestige of a Cadillac parked in their driveway, completely ignoring that the car underneath was absolute garbage. One angry reviewer famously stated, "I paid top dollar for a luxury Cadillac experience, and instead I got a vibrating, underpowered tractor." The Cimarron nearly destroyed Cadillac's legendary reputation as the standard of the world. It showed that badge engineering could temporarily fool the market, but the betrayal left a permanent scar on the brand. Buyers eventually realized they had been completely scammed by General Motors. But speaking of incredibly cheap cars that left buyers feeling furious and stranded, our 7th spot takes the concept of a cheap vehicle to a downright historical level. Get ready for a car so catastrophically bad that it literally became a running joke in Hollywood movies. At 7, we have the undisputed king of automotive punchlines, the Yugo GV, imported to the United States from 1985 to 1992. Built in communist Yugoslavia, the Yugo weighed a mere 1,800 pounds. It was powered by a microscopic engine producing a laughable 55 horsepower. Its absolute top speed was an incredibly terrifying 86 miles per hour, assuming you were going downhill. The build quality was shockingly atrocious. We are talking about interior door handles snapping off instantly, electrical components failing immediately, and a terrifying lack of any basic modern safety features. So, how did this dangerous communist-built disaster manage to invade America? Simple. Cold, hard cash. Malcolm Bricklin imported the Yugo and slapped a base price of just $3,990 on it. It was by far the absolute cheapest new car you could buy in America. Over 140,000 Americans bought into the Yugo fad because a brand new car for under $4,000 was an irresistible trap. They quickly learned that buying a used 10-year-old vehicle was vastly superior and much safer than driving a brand new fragile Yugo. The Yugo was incredibly cheap, unbelievably fragile, and constantly broken down on the side of the road. It was the ultimate definition of getting exactly what you pay for, leading to massive buyer regret across the country. However, our next car was not just a poorly built joke, it was a legendary American off-roader that was notoriously dangerous. Our 6th spot features a vehicle that actively tried to flip over and kill you if you dared to take it onto the paved highway. Prepare for a truly terrifying piece of American automotive history. Screeching into 6 is the iconic Jeep CJ5, a rugged American legend produced from 1954 to 1983. Off the road, crawling over massive boulders and blasting through deep mud, the CJ5 was an absolute beast. However, on paved American highways, it was a deadly nightmare. Weighing around 2,700 pounds, it featured an incredibly short 83-inch wheelbase, a narrow track, and a very high center of gravity. At highway speeds of 60 miles per hour, any sudden evasive maneuver to avoid a pothole would viciously throw the vehicle off balance, making it highly prone to rolling over. The danger became so publicly known that the famous television news program 60 Minutes ran a massive, damaging expose demonstrating exactly how easily the CJ5 could flip during routine driving. Despite this horrific on-road safety reputation, Americans bought over 600,000 of these specific models. Why did they ignore the obvious danger? Because the CJ5 was selling the ultimate American fantasy of rugged, patriotic freedom. Buyers completely ignored the terrifying highway dynamics in favor of raw fun factor, preferring to look cool with the doors off rather than worrying about their own personal safety. It was a vehicle bought purely with the heart, completely bypassing any logical thought from the brain. The Jeep CJ5 remains a legend, but its massive sales S proved that consumers will happily buy a dangerous machine if it makes them feel adventurous. But the CJ5 wasn't the only American icon rolling over in the 1980s. Ford had their own massive tipping hazard up next, and they brought the terrifying rollover dangers straight to the driveways of everyday suburban families. Our 5 spot is a masterclass in dangerous design. Rolling quite literally into 5 is the Ford Bronco II, produced from 1984 to 1990. In the early 80s, the sport utility vehicle craze was just beginning. Ford wanted a massive slice of the profits, so they built a compact SUV weighing roughly 3,400 pounds. It looked absolutely fantastic, offering rugged styling downsized for everyday city driving. However, just like the Jeep, Ford engineers created a vehicle with a brutally narrow track width and a dangerously high center of gravity. Taking corners at normal speeds felt like balancing on a tightrope. The Bronco II quickly developed a terrifying, highly publicized reputation for deadly rollover accidents during routine driving maneuvers. It was a family vehicle that could violently betray you at a moment's notice. Yet, despite the mounting lawsuits and horrific safety reports, Ford managed to sell hundreds of thousands of Bronco IIs. From a financial perspective, it was a massive win. The marketing was absolutely brilliant. They sold suburban families the powerful illusion of an adventurous outdoor lifestyle. People wanted to feel like rugged explorers on their simple daily commute to the local grocery store. The American public bought into this brilliant marketing illusion so heavily that the fatal safety records could not stop the incredible sales momentum. It completely proves that a massive, well-funded advertising campaign can outrun incredibly bad engineering. From dangerous highway rollovers to literally rusting away in your driveway, our 4 spot is an absolute masterclass in selling ancient, recycled technology as a brand new automobile. Get ready to see exactly how Ford successfully fooled over 2 million desperate buyers by simply putting fresh sheet metal over completely outdated mechanical garbage from the previous decade. Sliding into 4 is the Ford Maverick, manufactured from 1970 to 1977. Ford aggressively marketed the Maverick as the perfect modern compact car to fight off the rising tide of Japanese imports. It weighed about 2,800 pounds and featured a sleek, muscle car-like fastback roofline. But underneath that fresh sheet metal, Ford pulled off a massive technical scam. The Maverick was built entirely on the ancient, outdated underpinnings of the 1960s Ford Falcon. We are talking about terrible 4-wheel drum brakes that faded instantly, and a base engine requiring 15 seconds to hit 60 miles per hour. Furthermore, it had a horrific reputation for aggressive rust. The floorboards were notorious for literally rusting through so incredibly fast that you could see the highway passing beneath your feet. Despite selling ancient 1960s technology in the 1970s, Ford sold an unbelievable 2.1 million Mavericks. How is this even possible? Perfect, incredibly lucky timing. The Maverick hit the American market right before the massive 1973 oil crisis. When gasoline prices skyrocketed, terrified Americans needed cheap, simple, gas-saving cars immediately, and the Maverick was right there waiting on the dealership lot. As one old mechanic bluntly stated, the Maverick was a rusty bucket of bolts, but it was a very cheap bucket of bolts when nobody could afford expensive gas. Perfect historical timing absolutely destroyed the need for good engineering, but if you think recycling old technology is a massive scam, wait until you see what Chrysler did to trick over 1 million buyers in the early 2000s. Our 3 spot is a bizarre cultural phenomenon that traded every single ounce of mechanical reliability for a cheap plastic retro aesthetic. Revving up at 3 is the polarizing Chrysler PT Cruiser, infamously dominating roads from 2001 to 2010. When it debuted, it was a massive cultural phenomenon, featuring bizarre 1930s hot rod styling. Weighing a heavy 3,100 pounds, its base engine produced a sluggish 150 horsepower. But under the hood, it was a complete disaster. It was plagued by atrocious mechanical failures, specifically blowing head gaskets and snapping timing belts that would instantly destroy the entire engine. The interior was a dark cavern of the cheapest, most brittle gray plastics imaginable. Here is the brutal financial reality check. People were actually paying massive dealer markups, sometimes thousands of dollars over the sticker price, just to get a PT Cruiser. For that exact same money, buyers could have purchased a fully loaded, incredibly reliable Toyota Camry. But no, over 1 million Americans bought the PT Cruiser because they were completely hypnotized by the powerful nostalgia. They willingly traded long-term reliability, driving comfort, and basic build quality purely for a cheap plastic box that looked like an old gangster car. It quickly became the ultimate midlife crisis mobile. The massive success of the Chrysler PT Cruiser proved that Americans will blindly buy a fundamentally broken machine if it makes a loud fashion statement. It ruined the retro car movement forever. The PT Cruiser may have ruined a modern design trend, but our two-spot ruined the greatest, most legendary American muscle car legacy of all time. Get ready to witness the most embarrassing, underpowered vehicle ever to wear a famous badge. Ford absolutely castrated an American icon just to save a few dollars during a massive global energy crisis. Stalling out at 2 is the horrific Ford Mustang II, produced from 1974 to 1978. The original 1960s Mustang was a legendary symbol of raw American freedom, massive horsepower, and burning rubber. So what did Ford do for the second generation? They completely ruined it. They built the 2,900-pound Mustang II on the exact same chassis as the subcompact Ford Pinto. They took the legendary V8 engine option and choked it down to a pathetic, embarrassing 140 horsepower. It took over 10 seconds to reach 60 miles per hour. It was an absolute betrayal of the muscle car nameplate. It did not roar, it wheezed heavily down the road. As one furious automotive purist reviewed it years later, that is definitely not a real Mustang. It is just a glorified golf cart wearing a pony badge. Yet brace yourself for the shocking financial context. Ford sold over 1.1 million Mustang IIs. It remains one of the best-selling generations in Mustang history. How? Once again, the 1973 oil embargo saved a terrible car. Americans were sitting in massive, miles-long lines waiting for expensive gasoline. The golden era of the massive gas-guzzling American muscle car was instantly dead. Buyers were absolutely desperate for basic fuel economy. Ford downsized the legendary Mustang at the exact right second in automotive history. People bought it because they desperately wanted the famous Mustang name, but they urgently needed the fuel efficiency of a cheap economy car. Ford absolutely ruined the legacy, but they laughed all the way to the bank. However, the Mustang II's chassis donor takes our one spot because it literally exploded on impact. Taking the crown at 1 as the absolute worst best-selling car in American history is the infamous Ford Pinto, produced from 1971 to 1980. Weighing just over 2,000 pounds and producing a miserable 75 horsepower, the Pinto was meant to be Ford's ultimate cheap economy car, but it harbored a deadly, terrifying secret. Due to a highly rushed engineering process, the fuel tank was placed completely behind the rear axle with virtually no structural protection. In a rear-end collision at low speeds, the tank could puncture, spraying fuel into the cabin and erupting into a massive fireball. The Pinto was literally a rolling time bomb on American highways. But here is the most evil financial context in automotive history. Ford executives fully discovered this fatal flaw. A notorious internal cost-benefit memo revealed they calculated it would cost exactly $11 per car to fix the dangerous gas tank. However, executives coldly decided it was much cheaper to simply pay off the millions of dollars in wrongful death lawsuits than to recall and fix the dangerous vehicles. Despite this horrific revelation and massive public scandal, the Pinto's dirt-cheap price tag drove incredible record-breaking sales. Unbelievably, over 3 million Ford Pintos were sold to the American public. 3 million people drove a vehicle that the manufacturer actively knew could instantly burst into flames, all because it was highly affordable and convenient. It is the ultimate terrifying example of how a cheap price tag and good timing can force millions of people to buy the worst, most dangerous machine imaginable. The Ford Pinto proves that corporate greed and consumer desperation can create the most successful disasters in the entire history of the United States automotive industry. And there you have it. The top 10 absolute worst cars that somehow inexplicably sold millions of units in the United States. From the explosive Ford Pinto to the pathetic underpowered Mustang II, these vehicles strictly prove that you do not need brilliant engineering to make billions of dollars. You just need the right aggressive marketing, a dirt-cheap price tag, and absolutely perfect historical timing. What did you think of the list? Sound off in the comments below, and do not forget to hit subscribe for more high-octane automotive history.